everyone. I'm doing something a bit different with this video. Instead of like a vlog and a bit of like collage of events, I want to talk about a topic. So the topic of this video is breastfeeding. Some tips and tricks and like things that I would have liked to have known before I started breastfeeding, and things that might have made the journey a bit easier in the early days. I have been breastfeeding Billy for 21 months, and I can safely say I never in a million years thought that I would be breastfeeding a 21-month-old. I was like 6 weeks max. I'm going to do another video on the whole topic of ended breastfeeding later on, but for now I am a person who breastfed a newborn and a baby who is now a toddler just before he goes to sleep. I learned a thing or two along the way. I know in Ireland and possibly in the UK as well, is that a lot of women actually do want to breastfeed, but they're given wrong advice, or there's a lot of resistance from their families because they think that there's a problem with their body and their milk production, and they feel that they're doing the best thing by stopping breastfeeding. You know, it's the best thing for their baby, and sometimes it is, and it's a personal decision. That's the beauty of being a mother. You get to make these decisions. It's your body, it's your baby, and so I'm all about choice. So this video is not about telling people they should breastfeed. It's about helping people who do want to breastfeed and who might be struggling, or to give people a bit of an insight if they're currently considering their options. You might be pregnant, this might give you a bit of help. So things that are useful to know about breastfeeding. Number one, breastfeeding is supply and demand. I didn't really know that. In the early days you will feel like you're breastfeeding your baby 24/7, and you probably will be. They're on and off and on and off, and you'll get a lot of people around you saying he's feeding too much, or they wouldn't be feeding that baby again, that baby's taking advantage of you, and all that stuff that is so unhelpful to a new mother. Like literally, biologically, medically speaking, if you are feeding your baby when they want to be fed and it's supply and demand based, you're doing the right thing. That is what your body responds to. In the early days, your baby will do a lot of cluster feeding. They will feed a lot in the evening times. It is very important actually, because it's telling your body how much milk your baby needs. You'll find during a growth spurt or during a time of comfort when they're teething, they will feed more, and usually it's them actually being very clever, telling your body, in a day or two I'm actually going to need more milk, I'm getting bigger, I'm getting stronger, so I'm going to feed more today just to give you the heads up. So trust your baby. So it's not like formula feeding where you're measuring it in ounces and hours and days. And funnily enough, I actually have a friend and her baby was kind of a 3 or 4 hour breastfeeding baby, and in my experience that's quite rare. So it does happen, but in general babies will feed a lot in the first couple of months, and that's fine, that's normal. Number two, nipple shields exist. I didn't know about them. Sometimes they're not medically recommended because they are a piece of silicone. Sometimes people think it might give your baby some confusion, thinking it's a soother, thinking it's a bottle. People think they might not get enough milk through a nipple shield. There's a couple of reasons, and then obviously it's important to sterilise them and stuff like that. But for me, nipple shields were the sole reason why we were able to breastfeed. So I started breastfeeding my son when he was born, and it wasn't the fault of the hospital or the midwife, but the midwives just didn't have enough time to help me. I kept asking for help and it was very traumatic. Wouldn't latch on, and what they would do is they would hold his mouth open and hold my breast up to his mouth, and he would be roaring crying, far too distressed to latch on. Then I would think, I can't do this, he just, you know, there's something wrong with my nipples, something wrong with my breasts, and I'm just not made to breastfeed. So I gave formula and gave up. Because I've been feeding a lot, trying to feed for the first day, I got quite engorged and it was quite painful for a few days, and I just had that niggling feeling. I just really wanted it to have worked out, and I just felt sad about it. So I got home, and my mum had been speaking to somebody, a client of hers, who said, look, get her to try nipple shield, there's no way it's going to work. But look, I had nothing to lose, and I just thought, I'm really engorged, I have all this milk in my breasts, it just feels strange not to use it. I don't know if anyone else feels that way. It just felt really weird that my body wanted to give my baby something, and it had gone to the trouble of making this breast milk, and I couldn't give it to him, and it just felt really sad for me. Because this is the honest face of parenting, I'm just going to go ahead and continue to finish this film this video. Little man just woke up from his nap. Did you just do a burp? Did you do a big burpy boo? Who's on your top? A minion, yeah. Da 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 da. Nipple shields are the main reason why we were able to start breastfeeding. So that day I went out and bought... Do you not want me to talk? What's wrong? Do you want me to give you all my attention? Can I talk to that person there? I was just telling them about the fact that we used to use nipple shields, didn't we? Did they help you? Yeah, so I used to wear them, and then that meant that he could feed better, couldn't you? And the very first time we put them on, he fed beautifully, and I cried. Did I cry? He knows what we're talking about. Well, hello there, and welcome to my third attempt to make this video. Tongue tie. I had never heard of tongue tie until I had my son. Thankfully it didn't affect him, but tongue tie, it's weird. I don't know if it's the same in the UK, but in Ireland it's kind of like an underground movement of sorts. And actually I read a blog post recently and that's exactly how they described it, like something you do behind the scenes, and you have to sort of really look and struggle, I think, to find information about, even though it's something incredibly common and incredibly important in terms of how effectively your baby can feed. That's important. If your baby can't feed, or if your baby has pain when they're feeding, that's kind of something that needs to get sorted like before you leave the hospital, if at all possible. In Ireland, I know a lot of people who've had their baby's tongue tie snipped, which sounds really awful, but actually it's not so bad. Basically, a tongue tie is when there is a little flap of skin under the baby's tongue, which might be too long or might be fixed to the base of their mouth too kind of strongly, or it means that the tongue cannot move as freely as it needs to. It causes problems for babies who bottle feed, and it causes problems for babies who breastfeed. Some people do find breastfeeding painful. It's a different sensation and it probably takes a bit of time to get used to. I personally didn't find it painful. I don't know if that's to do with the fact that I did use the nipple shields for so long, and then afterwards I just kind of was so used to it. I definitely don't, it's not painful. I wouldn't let that deter you from breastfeeding. Definitely not. It's not like pain, like ouch, that hurt. It's like, oh, that's different. Some women do experience pain though. That's not to take from that. And be for a number of reasons. One of the reasons can be that their baby has a tongue tie, and the way they're feeding and the way they're trying to access the milk is causing them to have pain. It can be really, really horrible. So your baby's not feeding properly, your breasts are not basically releasing enough milk, so you can become quite engorged, and you know that can be very painful in itself, and you could develop a blocked milk duct, or even worse, mastitis. Getting your baby's tongue tie snipped, and sometimes a dental surgeon will do it, sometimes a pediatric doctor will do it. They basically just literally snip the piece of skin. Usually it's done in 2 seconds. You feed the baby straight away and they're absolutely fine afterwards. And I've actually met people, both bottle feeders and breastfeeders, who have just benefited so much from that little procedure, and their baby was much happier afterwards. And really it's something that should be checked in the hospital. Like before you leave the maternity hospital, your baby will be checked by a pediatric doctor. Their hips, they'll check their mouth, they'll check their breathing, their heart. Tongue tie is not something that seems to be regularly checked. It seems to be something that you go home from the hospital, you start trying to breastfeed or bottle feed, you notice something's not quite right, you then inquire, maybe you inquire on a Facebook thread or on an online support group. They might recommend somebody who you get in touch with, then you get in touch with someone else, and then you go see someone and you pay them, and then you get referred. It's a long process, and getting out of the house is tough enough with a newborn, but getting out of the house to try and find answers to something like this, that's becoming more and more common and normal for it to be dealt with. Next of all, mastitis. Mastitis is probably not as common as you would think. People say like, oh, you got mastitis, then that's it, you need to stop breastfeeding. That's not true at all. I didn't get mastitis. I did get a blocked duct a few times, and I just fed through it, and there's different things you can do, like in the shower you can use a hairbrush to just sort of like apply pressure to the area, and before you know it, the milk is released and it's fine. It's just one of those things that can happen. And did. And it started off with basically a sore kind of hot spot on her breast, and like a milk duct basically being blocked. That's what it felt like. But then she started to develop kind of cold and flu symptoms and became very hot, and she had a temperature, and she had quite a severe case of it and needed antibiotics, and it was a tough couple of days, but then she was fine. She said herself, if she had have decided to stop breastfeeding when she had mastitis, which some people did recommend to her, she would have been so devastated because she wasn't ready to stop breastfeeding, and she ended up feeding her baby for another, I would say, 8 months after. So mastitis is common enough, but it's treatable. You feel it coming on you and you feel you know, you're getting that kind of hot spot in your breast and you're feeling those flu symptoms, go to the doctor. Better to be safe than sorry, because I know if you catch mastitis quick enough and get the antibiotics into you quick enough, it's much easier than if you leave it a couple of days. It's something to look out for and be aware of, but not to be afraid of or to feel that it's something that's going to end your breastfeeding journey. Finally, I just wanted to talk about the whole bonding thing when it comes to breastfeed. First of all, I was never sure if I was going to breastfeed. In fact, I was actually more on the side of bottle feeding and kind of slightly considering breastfeeding and not 100% sure if it was something for me. And it was my mother who actually said to me, look, I really think you should give this a go. I breastfed you guys and these are the benefits and these are the things that will help. And I just kind of said, oh fine, I'll give it a go. And I was never more grateful to have been given that support, because I do think having a female in your life who has breastfed, who you can speak to about the facts rather than just the, I don't know, the stuff people like to say just to kind of, I don't know, not to turn you off breastfeeding, but that does happen, to be honest. Yeah, like that does happen. You have a supportive woman in your life who has breastfed, who can tell you exactly how it works, how it feels, what's going to happen, what to expect. You're a lot more likely to breastfeed, and that is statistically like true. Different surveys that were done, and it makes a huge difference. I definitely wouldn't have breastfed if my mother hadn't have given me that advice. 100%, I know that for sure. If you are considering breastfeeding, or even when you are breastfeeding for however long it is, people will say to you, how is the daddy going to bond with the baby? How is nanny and granddad going to bond with the baby? What I want to do is sort of dispel that myth, because it is a myth. Because realistically, whether you decide to breastfeed or you don't decide to breastfeed, biologically we have breasts to produce milk. That is why they're there. All other mammals breastfeed their babies. That is what they're there for. We have sexualized them in the media. It has made breastfeeding abnormal for a lot of people, and that is why when people would say stuff like, but the daddy can't bond with the baby, the fact that bonding is associated with bottle feeding is not really a good thing, because that shouldn't be what you base your decision on. Bonding with the baby for the dad and the nanny and the granddad and the friends and the uncles and the aunties, everything in between, is so much more than milk. Bath time and cuddles and basically spending time with the baby and enjoying being present with the baby, and not about giving the baby milk. It just bothers me, because it's one of those things that makes women feel guilty, and particularly it can be tough if the partner side of the family are saying those things, because that would definitely affect maybe how your partner feels, because he or she may not know about breastfeeding or may not have any information about breastfeeding. They might say, actually, yeah, that is going to, you know, affect my bonding with the baby. This is my first baby, and, you know, I want to experience that. So it's important that you have these types of conversations. It's just one element of bonding with the baby. Please do not let that be the reason why you don't breastfeed, because that is not true. Feeding into that, another thing I would say is just remember a baby, and there can be pressure, you know, to get back into shape, or, you know, to start going out again, or whatever it might be. But people will say things like, oh, when you're breastfeeding you can't leave the baby, and, you know, you're very restricted, and it's a really, really short amount of time in your life that you have to think about that. I went to a wedding when Billy was 6 weeks old. It was my boyfriend's cousin's wedding, a really big family wedding, one I didn't want to miss. But I was really, really unsure of what to do about Billy, and in the end he stayed in my mum's house, and I pumped breast milk, and he did, with a little bit of encouragement, he did take a bottle. But I found the whole thing a bit traumatizing, in the sense that I posted up a question on one of the support groups, a breastfeeding support group, which I do highly recommend, by the way. Just search them. I'm on one from Ireland, but there's plenty in the UK and America, I'm sure. Basically said, look, I'm going to a wedding in 6 weeks, I don't know what to do, how much breast milk do I need, I don't seem to be able to pump a lot, and somebody said to me, to be honest with you, if I was you, I probably wouldn't go, or I'd bring the baby with me. So I remember thinking it was a bit extreme, and like, it wasn't going to stop me from going out and the whole thing, but actually when I look back now, it made perfect sense, and I think if I could go back in time, that's probably what I would have done. It's not about being restricted. Like, I would have just brought my mother, and, you know, she could have stayed in a hotel room, and I would have went and fed him when he needed to be fed, and it would have been fine. But I have that level of confidence now that I didn't have back then. I didn't really understand what I should be doing and shouldn't be doing, and in the end you just have to do what feels natural to you. So it's a short amount of time, and before you know it, like, it'll be 6 months, your baby will be on solids, you know, you can give them a yogurt and different things, and you start to get your time back. It's just such a precious amount of time, and you have your whole life to go out and do different things, so just don't let that stress you out. And finally, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, and it's probably one of the most important things, find a support group, attend a support group, join the Facebook pages, go to the meetings, get a lactation consultant if you need, because support is key. If you have the right people around you, the right support and the right information, you will have an amazing breastfeeding journey, and I can guarantee you it is something you will not regret, and it's something you will grow to actually be very proud of. And as I said, I'm not a person who thinks everyone should breastfeed or anything like that, but I am proud of breastfeeding, and it didn't work out for me in the beginning, and it just worked out in the end, and I was really happy. And as I said, I was on the fence a bit. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this helps somebody who's considering breastfeeding, or if you're breastfeeding now. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments below, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to me and to Channel Mum for more videos. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!